What's up, everyone? Welcome back. And today I am joined by a special guest, Darren Magee, who is a counselor, psychotherapist, and clinical supervisor based in Ireland. And he has experience working with a wide range of issues such as anxiety, bereavement, addiction, trauma, relationship difficulties, and various diagnosed disorders. He has a YouTube channel and he has a lot of information on people that have been dealing with abuse, neglect, traumatic experiences in the workplace, relationships, and helping people towards recovery. So thank you so much, Darren, for being here.
Thanks for asking me, and thanks for inviting me onto your channel. It's nice to engage with your audience.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've been kind of just going through some of your content here. And like we talked about just a minute ago, obviously a lot of people deal with all kinds of emotional issues, a lot of traumatic experiences. And I think a lot of the times it begins in childhood. But lately there seems to be, we talk about CTPSD and all of these different things, but I think that the environments that people have been growing up have caused them as a defense mechanism, and correct me if I'm wrong, but to kind of adopt unhealthy patterns of behavior. And in one of the main patterns that seems to have emerged lately, and you can see this on the internet trending now, is this issue of narcissism and and being engaging in behavior, which is that a defense mechanism? Is that accurate to say that? Or
I'd say it is. First of all, I would say that narcissism, as unpopular as this might sound, everybody has elements and levels of narcissism. There can be healthy levels of narcissism. Narcissism is like it's your own best interest. It's your ambition. It's
yeah,
your self-care. You're looking after yourself. You're working somewhere, you want a promotion, so you're going to work hard to get that promotion. You go on a date, you hope they're going to like you. So pardon, I should have mentioned I do have a bit of a cold. um, so there can be a healthy level of narcissism, but if you look at it this way, it's like everybody experiences anxiety. Not everybody has an anxiety disorder. Okay,
right.
so sometimes what you're looking at is it's a disorder of narcissism. Those things, if you will, they get ramped up through the ceiling. They become heightened. Sometimes it doesn't even have to be a disorder. You just have very, very deeply ingrained behavioral traits and belief systems, and they can be very unhealthy. And yes, you're right, they can be a defense mechanism. I've sometimes referred to them as maladaptive defense mechanisms.
Right. And I think that, yeah, I mean, there's, the human beings are so complex. So there obviously isn't one size fits all for this. I think that as adults, and different people are at different levels of emotional maturity. So it could be that it continues to be a defense mechanism into adulthood. It also maybe could be that at a certain point, these people are making the conscious decision to do this because they want more validation. They want that control. They kind of want to be Captain Kirk, as you mentioned. They want all the
Yeah.
glory without putting in the effort. And the best way that they know to do this is to use manipulation because their other ways haven't worked for them. Or if somebody wants to, that's why you see people that will cheat when it comes to professional sports or cheat in different circumstances, right? They want the reward even though they're unable to get it in the normal way. So I guess starting off here, we had some points that we wanted to go over. So do you and I guess that's an interesting point. Do you think that sometimes this narcissistic, because like you said, we all have narcissistic traits, right? And so even somebody like myself, I can acknowledge that, yes, I do like to go to the gym. I do like to take care of myself. I do actually also enjoy putting myself out there, having this YouTube channel,
Mhm.
whatever it might be. But with different people, do you think that it's a coping mechanism? What kind of chaos is it chaotic childhood that a lot of the time?
It can be. It can be. There's many different paths that can lead to it. Sometimes you might have someone who has been raised to believe they are special. They, everything's given to them, everything's done for them, everything's handed to them. So what you see there is like a lack of resilience to
Yeah.
things like difficulty, disappointment, things like that. Um, so they just believe they're very strongly entitled. It's theirs by
Mhm.
right. They get the medal. They don't even have to enter the race. They get the medal just by virtue of turning up.
Yeah.
Um, so they can't really cope with things like disappointment whenever they meet someone who is maybe more accomplished than them. Um, there can also be someone who, on one hand, they're treated like they're worthless. They're only of value if they perform certain ways. If they come home from school, they've won the prize for whatever. The parents are living vicariously through them. So they're only of value if, they're only of value when the love is conditional, if you will. So they kind of reject that part of them that, well, I'm going to have to fail at some point in my life. I'm going to have to learn things at some point in my life. I'm not always going to be the biggest, the fastest, the strongest, the wisest, and all that sort of thing. There's many, I could be here all night just talking about this one point. There's many different paths to it.
Yeah.
There is the I suppose the age old question: is it nature or is it nurture? So there could be something by nature. It could be something inherited. It could be
Hmm.
something in the genes. There can be something going on there. A lot of the time, what I believe is it's learned behavior. People learn what works for them, so
Yeah.
they keep on doing it. Now, when it doesn't work for them, that's when they get very confused, they get very angry, they get, sometimes they'll go into a rage, sometimes they'll go into what's known as like a narcissistic collapse. There's many different ways it can manifest, but it's like they keep doing the same things. One of the things I mentioned in one of my videos once, I think, was the difference between the change in a person and the change in a tactic. What they do doesn't work, and rather than do a little bit of self-reflection, okay, maybe this isn't such a good idea, or maybe there is a better way of going about what I need to do, they just try a different tactic to do the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Um, you know, I've had, I've had, I, I know we're not going to go into details on a personal level, but I've known multiple people that fit into this category. And the male friends that I've had in my life tend to be this more grandiose type.
Hmm.
Um, and more recently, I've encountered the covert type. And it seems to me that while there are like certain similarities, I mean, the grandiose, they're very easy to spot.
Okay.
And the same thing happens though, where they want this result, right?
Hmm.
They don't want to put in the work, so they're willing to betray someone, they're willing to stab somebody in the back, they're willing to. And that's what's so strange about it is you can even see somebody that's displaying confidence, that's displaying some of these traits that are kind of good in a
Hmm.
grandiose narcissist that you are kind of drawn to, right?
Yeah, they are
um,
attractive qualities. Yeah,
yeah,
some of
they,
them
they can
are
be
attractive
attractive
qualities.
qualities, and but then it's like they do something snaps, they didn't get some certain result they wanted, and it's like they're willing to forego years of friendship,
Yeah,
and trust for something that in my mind, or possibly to another onlooker, would be like, what, like, it doesn't make sense.
yeah,
So I think that it's very just strange to witness firsthand. But I guess with that being said, the covert narcissist, they may possess some sort. I've heard that they can possess, some sort of. At least it seems like charisma, right? Or it
yeah,
seems like they possess. Uh, it seems from what I've studied and what I've come to understand is that they're mirroring. They're
mm,
able to draw people into them because they're able to mirror the personality or the preferences or the qualities or the traits of the person that they're interacting with, right? And that can look like, again, it can be something that draws you in because you're saying, oh, this person understands me, this person is seeing qualities in me that maybe other people haven't noticed. But what from the patterns of behavior, and what can tip you off that you're dealing with a covert narcissist rather than somebody who is
a grandiose.
a grandiose, and also somebody that might just be an empathetic person or an understanding person, right? Because the qualities that the covert displays, right, is like they find, they're very observant, they'll find things about you, mirror them, like I said, and maybe give you adulating compliments about them. So yeah, I'd love to hear, your how you identify, how do you.
Well, that's it's a bit of an ask. What I would say is the difference with a grandiose narcissist, you can generally spot them. It's almost like they arrive with a fanfare, you
Yeah.
know, and everything in the conversation is about them and how well they're doing and their new promotion and their shiny car and all the rest of it. The conversation keeps getting turned around to them. Um, Covert narcissism is different. You do still have the sense of grandiosity, but or the sense of entitlement and all of those things. But the difference is with the grandiose, you see an arrogance. With the covert, you see this. It's like life has treated me very badly. Life has treated me very unfair. I could have been had it not been for lists of excuses. And yes, they can seem quite compassionate. They're interested and they mirror and they do all that sort of thing. And that's very, very hard to spot because in the early stages of the relationship, you're getting to know each other, you're learning from each other, and you're noticing you have things in common and so on, as you do in any relationship. The best way to spot, I think, is when you just recognize long-term recurring behaviors. Because if you look at the characteristics of narcissism, there's a sense of entitlement, there's being disagreeable, there's a lack of empathy, they're being highly resistant to criticism,
Mm,
all of those things. But we're all like that on some level at some time. Okay,
I
we can
know.
all be disagreeable. We all have a sense of entitlement. If we win that race, we're entitled to that medal because we won it. So we all have these things, but it's recognizing they're like all day and every day, twice on a Sunday.
Yeah.
It's ongoing. With covert narcissism, what you often have is someone who lives, it's almost like a life of unfulfillment, is the way I would put it. Again, they could have been had it not been for some terrible thing. Or, someone has cheated them, someone has wronged them. And then we might offer them a suggestion, we might offer some kind of help, and, they're very grateful. Yeah, absolutely. But nothing ever changes.
Hmm.
And the more we try to help, the more we try to encourage, it's the way I phrase it is every solution has a problem.
Yeah.
Every
Yeah.
silver lining has a cloud, and every goal will have some kind of insurmountable obstacle.
Yeah. It's
And
almost
that's
like,
consistent.
yeah, it's almost like they just want to live in that victim state.
Mm,
You can try to bring them out and they can cognitively agree and, like you said, maybe even be appreciative, but they always revert back to that
mm.
baseline victim type thinking, victim mentality. I noticed that what you said also is very true. The really kind of the resistance to criticism is like almost this harsh irritability that isn't characteristic of the suggestion or the
Mm.
criticism that you're giving, and oftentimes it can be constructive criticism, right? But I think that most of the time when we're with people that we are close with and that we care about, it's not like we're coming at them in this attacking way to
Mm.
criticize them. We're simply pointing out, hey, like try to be, like I don't know, like an example of just being more careful when they drive after they run over a curb, or
Mm.
not doing something with the stove, or something that's like,
Yeah,
you know,
even if there's just an easier way of doing something.
even
Yeah,
if
yeah,
there's an easier way of doing something. And then there also is I noticed, like with somebody I was dealing with, is if I ever asked a question and they didn't know the answer, they would get very irritated as well.
mm.
If they had to say that they didn't know the answer, they felt they always needed to know the answer. And I don't know if that was something unique to them or if that's something that is characteristic of this pattern of behavior.
Yeah. It's the
But
sense of superiority.
this sense of superiority, sense of never wanting help, never needing help, or wanting to ask for help with anything, even if they're doing something wrong the wrong way, or there's clearly a better way to do it. That I think that would stem from this sense of, oh, I can do everything myself. Yeah, there's also you mentioned this phrase, they wet the bed and then blame the blanket. And I like that one a lot. I think if you want to kind of elaborate on that point a bit.
It's a difficulty in being able to accept responsibility for their own actions.
Yeah.
It's everything and everyone else's fault,
And I
so
think that also almost ties in with that resistance to criticism,
yeah.
right? Because if you're unwilling, if you have such an irritated, visceral reaction to any suggestion, any form of criticism, however innocent it may be, that's like saying, yeah, I'm not willing to look at this. I'm not willing to see and take responsibility for how I contributed to this.
What you're looking at with narcissism, again, it's such a complex, multi-layered thing, but just try and get down to the basic. You're dealing with a false sense of self. There's a version of themselves in here, there's a version of themselves. So there's a rejection of anything that contradicts that. Now, being highly resistant or highly sensitive to criticism, I'd go a wee bit further. Maybe I'd say it's more a resistance to anything that could be considered to be criticism.
Exactly.
So it's not necessarily criticism as such. It could be a different opinion. It could be a disagreement. It could be anything. It doesn't have
No
to.
kidding. Yeah. Yeah.
Pardon me. Even someone just knowing something they don't. Again,
Mm-hmm.
another characteristic is being highly competitive. Rather than just say I don't know the answer to that.
That's something that I noticed as well. That it's more than just being highly competitive. Also, it's like that if you beat them at anything, and it could be a match or a sporting thing. It's like it's this kind of sulking and or anger and a combination of both, and it's trying to trying to reason with them that, hey, look, this was just like a thing that we were playing for fun. It's not like my intention to
Yeah,
clobber you in this competitive way, but them stewing in those kinds of dark
yeah.
emotions.
It's what would happen in something like that. You're two of you are playing a game, silly little game. Maybe it's a board game or something, Monopoly or something, and the other person wins. Now, yes, that can bring something up. Um, what they've just seen is someone else can beat them at something. They're not feeling superior. They're not that version of themselves has just been challenged. They're not.
Mm-hmm.
They're not the alpha. Um, and that doesn't sit well. Again, it's a very false sense of self, but it's also very, very fragile.
Yeah.
Very, very easily bruised, which is why reality often gets rejected.
Yeah.
Uh, and if someone wins, well, they didn't just win because they made better choices during that game of Monopoly, or they didn't win because they're an expert at playing it. They play it all the time. Maybe they play it for a living. I don't know. No, they must have won because they cheated somehow.
Yeah. Yeah. That ties into another thing I've noticed, which is, and maybe you can explain the link between these two things, but making the other person entirely responsible for their feelings and their emotions. I noticed that that's another pattern with this, and then acting kind of maliciously and justifying their actions because of the way they feel. And again, putting that responsibility of the way that they feel onto the other person. If you'd care to kind of.
Well, there can be a lot of things going on. A lot of the times, the narcissism can be co-occurring with other things. It can be co-occurring with things like borderline, histrionic, antisocial. So you get a lot of crossovers, leakovers. There can be different things going on. But if we're just talking about narcissism, there is not the same as you. Yeah, it is similar, but not as intense as you would find in borderline. There's like an emotional dysregulation
Mm-hmm.
because there's a lack of empathy doesn't just necessarily mean they don't care about people. Lack of empathy can lead to a lot of things. It can mean they can struggle to self-reflect,
Hmm.
pick up on things like nuance and so on. So they might recognize they're in pain, they're hurting, but they don't necessarily know why. They can't actually name it. They can't regulate it. So if they're in pain, the other person must have hurt them. The other person
Yeah.
has done something to upset them. Now, maybe they've challenged their worldview. Maybe they've challenged their belief in something. Maybe they've even just disagreed about something. So that false self has now been attacked. And remember, it's very fragile.
Yeah.
So they react in a way, and it's even when it's like a narcissistic rage and it can come out, it's very aggressive. Sometimes it can be very, very abusive. It's a maladaptive way of them trying to protect that sense of themselves. They dump a lot of their own stuff onto other people. They accuse other people of doing the things themselves, and
Yeah.
depending on where they are in that spectrum and how aware they are, yeah, maybe they know exactly what they're doing, but other times they just lack that insight.
Right. And then that ties into, kind of that's what projection is, right? So
Mm.
what exactly, uh, you know, is that's another coping mechanism? It's another defense when they're feeling these bad feelings, they feel like they need to accuse, they need to project,
Hmm.
they need to shift blame onto the other person.
Yeah, you might have heard this phrase. It's a phrase that's commonly used, particularly within narcissistic families. They call it the scapegoat.
Hmm.
Usually, what you're talking about is one of the kids that would have been held accountable, responsible for all of the family's misery. You don't have to have been raised in a narcissistic family to be a scapegoat. Sometimes it's the partner, sometimes it's a friend they hang around
Yeah.
with, sometimes it's somebody in the workplace. The scapegoat is someone that all of the, if you will, all of the sin, all of the wrongdoing, all of the badness, the misbehavior, it's like that's all dumped onto the scapegoat. The scapegoat is held accountable for that. So
Hmm.
um, rather than take responsibility for their own actions, it feels easier to punish or blame something or someone else.
Yeah. And that's a symptom of the magical thinking, right?
Yeah,
I mean, this all ties in together, right?
yeah. Again, if you remember that very fragile sense of self is false. It's not real. Narcissistic people tend to believe they are unique and special. Now, the truth is they are, but they are no more unique and special than you or me.
Hmm.
Do
Yeah.
you know what I mean? We're all unique and special.
Right.
But they think they are unique and special above everybody else. Again, they're flawless, which is why no acknowledgement of wrongdoing, flaw, errors, things like that. And anything that challenges that is usually met with a lot of different ways. But it's usually met with a lot of resistance.
Right. Exact. I mean, yeah. I mean, and all of this stuff, just there's so many. It's kind of like as soon as we touch on one topic, it has all
Mm,
the other topics come back in because they're all very much interlinked. It seems. One thing that I noticed about the projection is to like paying attention to things that really generate that disproportionate emotional trigger in somebody.
mm,
Um, when something happens, let's say you're watching a TV show and somebody is there's a scene where there's something unfaithful
mm,
happening, and then or there's a scene of somebody acting a little bit crazy, a little bit emotional,
mm,
more so than they should have, and then this person watching the show has this huge triggered reaction to this. It seems to me that people will project what, especially narcissists, project what they don't like inside of themselves onto other people,
mhm.
kind of saying that's not mine. And this kind of ties into I think like the shadow in Jungian psychology that,
Yeah.
but they want to dissociate from it. They don't want to look at it. I don't have to do anything. I'm good. It's them over there. They're the bad people. Um, what is that a fair assessment? Do you think like paying
No,
attention to
I think that is a pretty good assessment. When it comes to our shadow self, I mean, Jung would even have said that unless we acknowledge our shadow self, unless we integrate our shadow self, we're going to keep on projecting it and blaming other people. And
yeah.
the thing about our shadow self is our shadow self are those parts of us that are unacceptable. They're unacceptable not only to other people, but they're unacceptable to us as well. But some of those things that are unacceptable are maybe the things, maybe there's nothing wrong with them, but we've been led to believe they're bad.
Yeah.
Things like having a bit of humility. If I show a bit of humility, that means I'm weak.
Mm-hmm.
No, it doesn't actually. It's actually the opposite. It shows you have integrity. It shows you have an inner strength. Or if I were to have boundaries, that means I'm being selfish. No,
Yeah.
it doesn't. You need to have boundaries. Everybody needs to have boundaries. We all have them. Um, so the shadow self, it's not all the bad stuff. Sometimes there's things in there that people have been led to believe are bad. But if you think again that aspect of narcissism where they are flawless, they are perfect, they can't have a shadow self. By its very nature, that would contradict that perfect version of themselves.
Yeah. So do you think that that inability to, and do you think that when somebody has this big triggered reaction to something, do you think that could be an indication that they may be a narcissist, or at the very least they're disconnected to that part of themselves?
Well, again, it comes down to the individual. I mean, anybody could watch something on TV and it really, really upsets them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then whenever we get really, really upset, yeah, we might get a little bit angry, we might get a little bit distant, whatever. We can generally rein it in. We recognize afterwards, even if our reaction was out of proportion to something, and we could say to someone, "Look, I'm sorry that brought up something in me, and it didn't mean to, come out the way I did."
Right.
With a narcissistic person, they haven't done anything wrong. The fact that someone has pointed out their reaction or their behavior now adds to the fact that they're being wronged, if you know what I
Yeah.
mean.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and that's what I mean is like, that shows in the first example, that shows a sense of honesty, a sense of owning
Mm.
up to, yeah, I
Taking
did overreact,
responsibility, yeah.
and like you said, it brought something up for me. And that shows that you're being transparent with the person. Whereas the alternate, like just that that incredible unwillingness to acknowledge that there might be something a little bit out of place there with that emotional reaction to that is a little bit disconcerting. I mean, sometimes you get this, and it's tough, like doing this because you want to be able to identify this type of behavior, but I think sometimes it comes as a feeling, like a gut feeling that you have. It's like something's not quite right
Yeah.
about this. But I mean, it's just fascinating the level of projection that people will do, especially accusing you. There's another phrase I've heard where the accusations are their confessions, because they're accusing you of something that you haven't done. You aren't even thinking of doing, but it gets you unstable. It destabilizes you. It says, why are they accusing me of this? Did I do something that led them to believe that I could have been
Mm.
doing? And then it causes you to question yourself, and takes it takes the spotlight off of them, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's a very insidious thing, like projection. But again, I think it comes down to, like you said, noticing the patterns. If this is
Yeah.
happening over and over again, because I interpret it as insecurity sometimes when they're projecting, when they're saying, "Oh, did you do this?" I'm thinking, well, maybe they had something in their past that somebody did something like that to them, and now they're feeling insecure, and so I need to assuage
Yeah.
their those feelings. But how do you observe and know that this is actually projection rather than some form of insecurity? Or
Again, it depends on the individual. Sometimes you get someone and the way they behave, it's like it's just jumping all over the place. Whatever the accusation is, it's not even staying to the one thing. It's like it's leaping all around the place. And sometimes the things that they might be saying, they do sound a little bit childlike. Sometimes they might be, the reasoning rather, I would say, sounds a little bit childlike. And sometimes the anger, the vitriol, I'm not saying this to minimize anyone's experience because I know it's horrible to be on the wrong end of it. But sometimes it's of the level of, I would describe it as Wile E. Coyote. It's almost cartoon level. It's
mm-hmm.
ridiculous in its nature.
Yeah,
Even though it
yeah.
still hurts, it can be very painful. But then
Especially
there are
when
other
there is
times you get someone else
there's
to
no
say it's not
evidence
always
that
narcissism. There can
this
be
thing that
other.
they're projecting onto you has actually occurred. They're just kind of running off with this whole narrative that they've come up with.
Yeah. Um, they could be on what I've been looking more and more into, the dark tetrad, and there's 4 different aspects to that. There is the narcissism, but there's also psychopathy. There's Machiavellianism, which is being very manipulative, and there's also sadism.
Yeah.
So you could have someone, and yeah, they are accusing you of this, that, and the other, but it's like it's not that they're emotionally dysregulated. They know exactly what they're doing. There is a very manipulative thing behind it. They might
Hmm.
even also be taking pleasure
Hmm.
from the other person's distress.
Yeah.
Because the other person is trying to reason with and trying to justify and trying to explain things that they know nothing about.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? And how do you how do you defend yourself against someone who can tell you something like, I know exactly what you're thinking? I mean, really, like you can see thoughts, but
Exactly.
you're trying to defend yourself against someone that can claim they can mind read.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's super manipulative. I also think that, it's easier to spot in person, but when somebody's on the phone or they're doing this over text, it's harder to deal with because you're not able to read, like you said, there's so many things that can tip you off into like what's
Mm.
really going on with somebody when you're in their physical presence. But yeah, I mean, that ability, and then like calling you and then screening your calls, and that it's there's so many just different manipulation tactics
Yeah,
that can go on with the phone as well.
there's something I sometimes say to people, and I talk in groups and things, or I'm giving a talk to whatever. If you allow someone to have access to your phone, there's nothing wrong with that, by the way, nothing wrong with it. But if you allow someone to have access to your phone, you need to ask yourself a question. Are you doing it because you trust them? Or are you doing it because you have to prove to them that you can be trusted? Because they're two very different things, aren't they?
Yeah, yeah, they are. Um, and yeah, I mean, there's also like just so many things. I mean, it's so confusing too when you're dealing with somebody like this because they might do certain things that make you feel like, oh yeah, they're very trusting. Like they've shared their passcode to their phone with me, right? They're like they volunteered it. You didn't even ask for it. They're just like, hey, if you want to blah blah blah, look at music, whatever. And so then they leave their phone around and stuff. But I'm not the type of person to want to go through somebody's phone. I never like do that. But just the fact that they were willing to be open with it makes me feel like, yeah, well, this person's like
Yeah.
pretty trustworthy, right? But then there might be other behavior that conflicts with that. Like you see them on their phone, but then they notice you coming and they immediately swipe out of what they were doing, or they immediately put their phone down. Or it's like, and then you might think that you might just write that off as just, oh, well, maybe they're just, because sometimes I can be, if I'm doing something or in the middle of something and somebody comes in the room, it kind of startles me, or it makes me kind of
Yeah.
like, um, and maybe you just attribute it to that. But again, it's like they talk about how, like, people that commit crimes, they usually like return to the scene of the crime or something, or it's almost, there's something weird about when you're open with somebody, then it's like, oh well, now they're not even going to think that I was doing something behind their back because I gave
Mm.
them the passcode to my phone, or I don't know. And again, there's no hard and fast rules with this stuff, but that's why it gets so confusing because there's all these like mixed things going on.
Yeah. One of the things that narcissistic people do, I'm sure you've heard this phrase, there's a lot of crazy making.
Yeah,
They
yeah.
are things that don't make sense. Now, human beings, as a rule, we don't like things that don't make sense. You know,
Oh,
we
yeah,
we like things to make sense. We like to see cause and effect, rhyme and reason. We like to be able to put things in boxes, identify things. This is not my phrase, but someone else said this, and it made me laugh. Trying to figure some people out is like trying to smell the color 9. They just make no sense.
yeah,
And we don't like things like, I've been decent. Why am I being treated like this? I'm trying to be honest. Why do I keep getting accused of lying? What I did was within good intentions. Why am I being accused of being manipulative and cold? I said no because I didn't have the time, I didn't have the resources. Why am I being accused of being selfish and heartless? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
No it makes no sense to us.
Yeah.
Also, the more we give in, the more we back down, the more we try to pacify someone, try to placate them. It's never the fact that it's never enough
Hmm.
because they keep wanting more. That drives us insane. We keep
Yeah.
thinking there's something wrong with us, and everybody at some point in a situation or an environment or a relationship with someone who behaves like that, sooner or later, they do start to wake up and they realize, actually, maybe I'm not the problem.
Hmm. Yeah. And yeah, no, absolutely. And especially when, in certain situations that I've been in, I have had those firm kind of boundaries where they're doing the crazy making, right? And then I'm like, well, no, that's like not what happened. They're running off with this other narrative, and I'm saying that's not what happened. But then what happens, the manipulation kicks in where they say, you never give me a true apology for what you for the pain you've caused me or whatever. And so I'm like, okay, like if that's really true, I can apologize for this thing, even though I don't think that for example, like sending a text within a certain time or at a certain time of day, or not texting in a certain time of day. And I'm like, had this conversation before. First of all, I'm not a big fan of texting, but okay, like, all right, I'm sorry, I can text you at this time of day, right? But it's like as soon as you give that 1 inch,
Mm.
now they run off with a take a mile with it, because now they're saying, oh well, now this person has admitted some fault,
Yeah.
and now I can go and berate them because, and let's say that maybe I agreed to send a text at a certain time of day, but now, and they said, okay, that's all I'm asking for. They make it look like all I'm asking for is this. You're making it sound like I'm asking for too much. I'm asking for too much, blah blah blah. And then they come at you in this emotional attacking way, and you're like, well, yeah, like I told you I can text you at this time, but now that wasn't enough. Now they changed the story again,
The
and they say,
goalposts
oh, you didn't.
constantly shift. Yeah, the
Yeah,
goalposts
the
constantly shift.
goalpost constantly shifts.
That's what you've just outlined there is pretty much how gaslighting works. Now, gaslighting isn't just lying to someone.
Hmm.
It can be at its very minimum. What you've just said didn't happen. You know, that's at its very, very minimum. It's trying to rewrite someone's narrative, someone's reality. Very skilled manipulative people, the gaslighting is something that takes quite a bit of time to perfect, and it's a little piece at a time. So you have two people chatting away, they're talking about something, and they get a question like, you sure that's how that happened? Because, what about this? And the person goes, oh, well, yeah, okay. So maybe it wasn't that. But anyway, back to the story. This is, the next time they're talking, there's another little bit of doubt planted. Um, but sure, the last time, do you remember? Sure, you thought it happened over there, but it was over here. You were wrong about that. So the person's acknowledging, yeah, actually, well, at least I admitted I was wrong about it. And it keeps on going until the person doesn't even know if they're coming or going anymore. They're lucky if they can remember their name. Sometimes, the way some people will manipulate. Doesn't matter what they do or what they say or what they call the other person out on. It didn't happen. Didn't happen the way you remembered it. If it did happen, it wasn't as bad as you're saying. If it was as bad as you're saying, well, you were clearly to blame. Did you just see what I'm getting at? And it's a
Yeah.
little piece at a time. Person's sense of reality, sense of themselves gets undermined a little piece at a time. It's not always
Yeah.
just jumping in with, barefaced lies.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Because over the course of time, they've planted in that
Mm.
your freedom, your boundaries, your ability to, say, go hang out with your friends, or go do this, or spend time with other people, or anything, has all been framed in this light of you being selfish, of you being potentially a cheater, potentially going out to do these things because you were doing things behind their back. Again, it goes back to projection, because that's the way that these people think. That's the way that they are. That's probably what they're doing. or
Yeah.
what maybe what they want to do. And then you get to you think, and the twisting of the words, the word salad.
Mm.
Um, you say one thing, but they take it and they make it out completely into something else. You're saying I wanted to hang out with my friends, and they're painting it this story that you're saying that you want to go to the clubs and hook up with other girls or something. It's
Yeah.
like that's not what I said at all.
Yeah.
It's not even in the same realm of. But I, or it's like, yeah, I want to go get a drink with my friend at the bar or at a place, and then yeah, that becomes that version of events, right?
Yeah.
So
You would rather hang out with them than me. You must really hate me. You put them above me. You think more of them than me. And we
mhm.
get guilt tripped, we get shamed, we get, we feel really bad, and it's not it at all. I mean, this could be the first time we've seen them in 6 months. Do you
Yeah,
know
no,
what I mean?
exactly, yeah.
Yeah, it's the other thing about relationships like that is what people find is they, again, a little piece at a time, they start to become isolated from their friends,
Hmm.
from their family, people that care about them.
Yeah,
And this is the thing about why it's so hard to spot. If you were to meet someone and you go on a first date, and the first thing they say to you is, by the way, I don't like your hair like that. You're going to have to change your hair and lose the beard. I don't like beards. Um, okay, do you have any friends? Well, the last thing I want is for anyone else to have your attention because you're supposed to worship me.
yeah.
Okay. And so I've decided I don't like your friends. They're not good for you. By the way, how about your family? Okay, they sound really nice. Well, the last thing I want is for you to have people in your life that care about you because they'll be able to recognize and identify when you start to go downhill.
Yeah, exactly.
So the best thing you could do is to stop having any contact with them. Now, if you went on a first date with someone like that, do you know what? I'm going to hazard a guess. There wouldn't be a second one. You
Yeah,
know what I mean?
exactly.
So
No,
it's a little tiny subtle piece at a time.
yeah, it is. And there'll be tears and things too that come out in these conversations to make you feel as if going to hang out with your friends. And now if they give you that, now they say, oh, I shouldn't have done that, and can go hang out with your friends. But there was all these tears and all this fanfare. Now you're thinking the way that the whole thing has been framed up is like, oh yeah, like I'm got I've I'm
That's right.
getting to go with my friends now, as if you've done some, like, as if you've accomplished some huge task, which is actually just a given.
Yeah,
And so it's like a frog in the water, like you said. It happens very slowly over time.
yeah. We don't always see it, but this is the thing. I say everybody at some point realizes something's not right, and it happens in different ways. Now, sometimes someone might go on YouTube. They might do that thing that everybody does. They type in the search, why the hell do they behave like this? And these list of videos come up and they go, right. Other times they might just be watching a movie. They might even be sitting with the person. The two of them are watching a movie, and the very thing that's going on in their relationship is going on here.
Mm-hmm.
And they're thinking, bloody hell.
Mm-hmm.
So there's an awareness, or they might be talking to someone else, or it could be anything, but sooner or later something starts to click that something's not working. Now, different things start to happen. Sometimes people might try that bit harder because they know it's not that healthy. So if you remember, there are very attractive qualities. So we are attracted to those qualities. We're attracted to the person that we fell in love with. And what we try to do is we try to bring out the best in them.
Yeah, exactly.
And the more that happens, you find the more entrenched they become.
Yeah,
It's
it's such a weird phenomenon too, because and I'm curious, what do you mean the more entrenched they become in the more that we try to bring out the best in them? How does that work?
this is speculation on my part, okay?
Uh-huh. Yeah.
The reason why the more entrenched they become is because they find what they're doing is working.
Mm, yeah. This is something that I do a lot of videos on, like, manifestation,
Mhm.
and I don't know if you're familiar with Neville Goddard and any of the people in this kind of spiritual
No.
space that talk about, but basically they talk about, you put it, I mean, when it comes to manifesting, just the law of attraction, all that, the more that you think one thing, the more that you'll see that, right? And so a lot of people in this space, they want to put out that positive intention, and they want to see the best in people. They want to see the situation for what it could be. And so as do I. And I do believe in that. But I think there's a kind of danger in that type of thinking when you really, really dive into that, thinking, oh, yeah, like the way that I show up, if I truly see this person as being like this,
Mm.
they will rise to the occasion, they will become like this.
Yeah.
You can almost kind of delude yourself into thinking sometimes that you actually can bring out the best in this person when they actually keep showing you little signals and little signs here and there that that's actually not, like, they're
Yeah.
not willing to do that. They're not willing to become that version of themselves, that better version of themselves. They're not willing to do introspection. They're not willing to self-improve. They're not willing to reflect upon their actions and the impact it's having on you and those around them. And the another confusing thing about this is that they can be very cognitively able to understand this. Like, let's say that you're reading self-development books together, you're listening to them in the car, and you're reading books on forgiveness and how to do all these things, and they can cognitively understand it. They repeat back to you, and they actually have an intellectual understanding.
Yeah.
But and that can confuse you because you're thinking, yeah, that I'm making a positive impact in this person's kind of awareness, and but then they revert back to these old behaviors or these old patterns, or you see this glimpse of they're justifying something that was actually, terrible behavior.
Mm.
And you're like, what is really going on here? How are they telling me one thing? And that's another weird thing is, yeah, and probably a very telltale sign is when their actions are not lining up with their words.
It is a strange thing because you could be talking to someone who is very, very intelligent. They could probably do the square root of pi down to about 10 decimal places or something. They are, really, really intelligent. They could be very creative. On an emotional level, no, not so much.
Yeah.
You're dealing with someone who maybe stopped growing emotionally, maybe at the age of 8 or 10 or something,
Yeah.
which is why sometimes, when you see that narcissistic rage, a lot of people say they're like temper tantrums, they're like
Oh, yeah.
toddlers,
Yeah.
because it stopped at that level. So intellectually, I guess, yeah, very smart. They can, they can design things, they can do things, they can, all manner of things. But on an emotional level, no. So yeah, cognitively, they will get concepts, books, and they will think, yeah, it's a good idea and so on. But when it comes to applying it, remember the false sense of self.
Yeah.
This is the thing. If they're already perfect, why do they have to improve?
And that's what's so weird, because there's got to be a huge amount of cognitive dissonance when you're listening to these books, analyzing these things, doing self-improvement, and they may be even picking up better habits. Let's say that you're going to the gym, you're eating healthier with this person,
Mm.
and you're doing all these things to increase the quality of life. How can they? I don't know how. They must have a huge amount of cognitive dissonance to be, on one hand, willing to go to the gym, embrace these better habits, but when it comes
Mhm.
emotionally, they're completely unwilling to. Maybe they try, maybe they make an attempt, and everyone is, like you said, is different on the spectrum, but
Yeah.
maybe they just can't. They just
Mm.
snap back, or they get back around other people or other things, and it triggers them. They just snap back and revert to those old ways of being.
I think, I mean, yeah, you get people who they will work very hard while they're in work because they want to get to the top, they want the promotion, things like that. So, and they could be very, very good at what they do. And yes, they could be going to the gym. There is something to be said for when we look good, we feel good. You're talking to someone that hasn't been to the gym in about 30 years, but generally when you look good, you feel good. So there is that element as well. I think it comes down to, it's the interpersonal, it's the personal development, it's different things like that. It's even having to find, a better way, a new way of doing something. That would mean having to admit they've been doing something wrong in the first place. And again, that's what gets rejected.
Yeah. And that's what's so crazy, is because it seems to me, they can do those in certain areas of their life, right?
Mm.
They can cut out poor quality food, and they can go to the gym and lose 30 pounds. But when it comes to this when it comes to this emotional stuff, it's like, and like I said, maybe they made an attempt maybe it is that they made that genuine attempt and they wanted to change, but that false sense of self kicked back in, or something triggered them to get back into that state where they then rejected it. Because
Yeah.
it's a weird conundrum that they're able to admit certain things. Yeah, I may not have had this right. I probably should embrace these better, healthier food, healthier diet, healthier lifestyle, but I'm unable to shift this area. It's
But
very
then,
strange.
well, I suppose there's another way of looking at it as well. If someone's going to the gym, if they're eating well, if they're doing well in work, if they're, being quite successful in different areas, that's going to get them validation.
Mm-hmm.
That's going to get them admiration.
Yeah,
That's going
that's
to get
true.
them attention. So it can be a way of them, if you will, getting their narcissistic supply.
Yeah, that's actually a valid point. Very, very true. Um, how do we assert boundaries with these types of people? Let's say that we realize that we are dealing with this. We want to kind of cultivate that. You know,
Hmm.
normally speaking, we like you said, we want to see the best in people, right? But once we realize what we're dealing with here, cultivating that indifference and setting those boundaries, how do we do that in a effective manner?
Well, really, again, it comes down to the individual because if you're just up against someone who's self-absorbed, shall we say,
Yeah, yeah,
that's going to be difficult, but it's going to be a lot easier than someone who has the potential of being violent and vindictive.
right.
Do you know what I mean? But when it comes to our boundaries, I think it begins with recognizing what our boundaries are. We have different kinds of boundaries. We have emotional boundaries, physical boundaries. We have intellectual boundaries, spiritual boundaries. We have many different kinds of boundaries. Also recognizing that our boundaries can be flexible. They don't always have to be set in stone. Um, your boundaries with the people closest to you, your family, people that love you, people you love, they're going to be different from, say, the people you work with or your neighbors. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
There's going to be a flexibility. Some people you will cut a bit of slack, others not so much. If we're far too rigid with our boundaries, like everything is, that's a red line. That's no. That's not happening. That's not acceptable. If we're far too rigid with our boundaries, I don't think that's I don't think that's that healthy. You'll probably find you might find we're the problematic one, if you want to put it that way. If our boundaries are far too relaxed, we don't really assert them at all.
mm-hmm.
We're a doormat.
Mm-hmm.
So it's looking at our different kind of boundaries, recognizing what they are, what's acceptable and what isn't in different situations and with different people.
Yeah,
If we are going to assert our boundaries, and this is the bit where we have to be careful, we have to make it clear there are consequences for crossing them. Now, what
yeah,
we don't have to do is turn into the Hulk or something, that's not what I'm suggesting. If there aren't any consequences, now most people will respect your boundaries. If you make it clear to them, they'll probably go, yeah, fine, I didn't realize that was a problem, fair enough. But then you get, again, the manipulative type, the narcissistic type, and they're going to, as you said earlier, they're going to see if they can get that inch. And once they get that inch, the next thing a couple of
mm-hmm.
miles down the road, they're still, trying to get more. If you're going to set some kind of consequence, what I often say to people is don't go for the nuclear option. Because if you say to someone, if you do that, that's it, you're out the door, I don't ever want to see you again. And then they do that. But then you back down and you say, that's it, we're not going out on Friday, or that's it, I'm not doing that thing that I said I would do for you, or whatever. Even though you're showing the consequences, you've just shown them that you weren't serious about, the nuclear option. So when you set boundaries, if someone keeps on crossing them, you need to show some kind of consequence. Whatever that consequence is, you need to follow it through. Otherwise, they're not going to take you seriously.
Yeah,
Now, even when you do that, you'll get temper tantrums. They'll fold their arms, they'll stick their lip out, they'll
yeah,
roll about on the floor in front of you, clutching their throat, saying, look at what you're doing to me.
exactly.
And this really comes up to, go back to boundaries, recognizing this isn't my stuff.
Yeah, for
I
sure.
think I think at its very minimum, you look at boundaries as what's mine and what's yours. Okay.
Yeah.
I don't own that stuff. It's like even when other people say, I mean, the narcissistic person might say something like, you go out with your friends on Friday night, that's it, we're finished, I never want to see you again. So next thing you know, we're thinking, really, is it that bad? Should I maybe reconsider this? Again, I never advocate people say this, but it's just something to hold in your head. When you say to someone, if you decide not to speak to me again, that's your choice, I can't make it for you.
I can't make it for you, the
Yeah.
choice.
If
Yeah.
you decide never to speak to me again because I'm going out with my friends who I
Hmm.
haven't seen for maybe 6 months or whatever,
Hmm.
maybe a birthday party or could be something special occasion. If you decide not to speak to me again, that will be your choice. I
Yeah.
can't make that choice for you. That is your decision.
Yeah, for sure. What types of, I mean, because obviously, that is like you said, that's
The
the
nuclear
end
option.
all be all nuclear option. Do you have any examples of kind of like options that you think work well or that you've seen people use as consequences that are some kind of like consequences that work better?
Well, in more places like workplaces, they're generally work consequences because there's things like procedures, there's codes of
Yeah.
conduct and things
Yeah.
like that. In personal relationships, it's a lot more difficult because, again, we have to come up with these things ourselves.
Hmm.
What I would say about consequences is not necessarily doing something to deliberately take away something from the other person to hurt them. That's not necessarily what we're doing. But it is showing a consequence, such as, you mentioned the phone earlier. Okay, you're going through my phone, you keep looking for stuff on the phone, there's nothing on the phone, but you keep going through it and that's it, I'm changing the password, you're not getting access to it again.
Hmm.
I mean, that's just something I'm thinking of now, but did you see what I mean?
Yeah.
You have access to my phone because I trust you. You're misplacing, you're misusing that trust. You're
Yeah.
actively looking for things. Now, if you don't
Yeah.
trust, that's your issue.
Or maybe it could be something like if they keep having these tantrums that we're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Look, if you don't do something to make an effort to get this resolved, whether that's going to a therapist or
Mm-hmm.
taking a certain form of medication or literally just stopping this behavior, then and again, I would be, because it's like what consequence do you want to put there? I don't know what the consequence would be, but it would be then maybe we need to.
I'm just wondering. I mean, again, it depends on the relationship. It depends on the person, and so on. Um, Someone does throw a tantrum. Okay, we're not discussing this any further until you calm down.
Hmm.
We
Yeah.
will we'll discuss this when you're feeling better.
Hmm.
Or I'm not answering any more accusations.
Yeah.
Or you know things like, or I've already answered your question.
Mhm. Right.
I mean, that's a way of asserting your boundaries.
Yeah. Yeah. True. True. A couple more things. Would you care to tell us about DARVO a little bit?
Darvo is, yeah. You point something out. It doesn't even have to be anything major. It could even just be a small thing. I left a bar of chocolate there. Where did it go? I don't know. Wasn't me. So the first thing you get is denial. It
Hmm.
never happened. I didn't say that. It's not the way you remember it. Or, there's just complete and utter denial.
Right.
After the denial, usually at the same time as well, the denial comes, but then there's an attack on the person who actually pointed out what happened.
Hmm.
So there's an attack on them. Okay, you're mentioning a bar of chocolate. I made you a cup of coffee 3 years ago, and you still haven't said thank you. Or
Hmm.
what about that time you did this, or what about that time you said that? And none of this has got anything to do with the missing chocolate, by the way.
No. Yeah.
But it's an attack on the person. It's an attack on their integrity. It's an attack on their motivations. Um, it's a way of deflecting away from the actual issue. And what they're doing as well is they start to change the role. Someone has pointed out they've eaten their chocolate and they're now in a position of victimhood. They're being wrongly accused, falsely accused, or the fact that they're being accused at all, is completely out of proportion to the actual incident itself. And it could have been something as simple as, did you eat that chocolate? I bought that earlier. I was going to take it from a lunch or something.
Yeah, and just for the people watching this, DARVO stands for deny,
attack, reverse, victim, offender.
Yeah.
The offender now becomes the victim. The victim now becomes the offender.
Yeah. And it's a manipulation. It's just to destabilize the person, right? To throw them off, to point the accusations at them. So now they are defending themselves rather than looking at what this person's doing.
Yeah, they have to defend themselves usually against something that's not real at all, or something that could be out of context.
You know what's even crazier is to stack on top of that is once you defend yourself, now they're like, why are you getting so defensive?
yeah. The fact that you're being defensive is evidence of your guilt.
Yeah, exactly, right? They just stack these things on top of each other.
I would say just like the gaslighting, I often say that it can be hard. It takes a lot of practice. You just stick to the point. I just asked who ate the chocolate. I just asked, did you take the chocolate? I'm not accusing you of anything. I'm just asking, did you take it? Yeah, we just stick to the same point. We sound like, and I know it's a kind of antiquated kind of phrase, given it's the 21st century. We just keep saying the same thing. We're like a broken record.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Is that? I mean, do you think that's how we handle gaslighting?
That's how I would handle it.
Yeah.
We just stick to the point. We stick to the reality. Now, it doesn't mean that just because someone says something doesn't necessarily mean they're gaslighting us, because they might have a perspective we hadn't considered. They might have information we didn't have. We could well be wrong. So it is perfectly reasonable to be open to new information. But if you have a sense of your own reality.
Well, yeah. And if you know that they're lying to you, like let's say that they came in at midnight, but now they're telling you they came in at 8 p.m.
Yeah.
But you heard the door unlatch and lock and you heard them come in at midnight.
Yeah.
Then how would you handle that situation?
I'd stick to the 8 p.m. I just keep saying.
Yeah. Or what if they told you? Go ahead.
Sorry, I was just going to say, even if it's the other way around, you come in at 8 p.m. and you're accused of being in at midnight.
Mm-hmm.
No, I was in at 8.
Mm-hmm.
You weren't. I looked at the clock. It was 12 o'clock. You were definitely. It was in at 8. Just keep saying the same thing.
Yeah.
You're sticking to your own reality. And what sometimes happens is when you're doing that, you'll find it starts to leap and jump all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
It's like lifting a handful of mud and throwing it, just hoping something sticks.
Yeah.
But we just stick to the same point. We ask the same question, or we give the same answer.
Yeah. How would you handle it if somebody's coming in drunk and they're telling you they only had one drink?
I wouldn't. I'll tell you why. Have you ever tried to reason with a drunken person?
Yeah. It doesn't go very well.
No, drunk people are the smartest person in the room. They're the bravest person in the room. They're the funniest person in the room. They're the most righteous person in the room. You cannot reason with a drunk person. I wouldn't even try.
Yeah. What about the following day?
The following day?
Well, yeah, when they're not drunk anymore.
Maybe just ask them, how much were you drinking last night? One drink. Well, just as you're saying that, it reminds me, the comedian Billy Connolly.
I don't actually.
Oh, Billy Connolly, very famous Scottish comedian. I thought you'd be aware of me. He actually lives over in America now. He used to make this joke from his perspective, like his joke. He used to say that his wife used to think a pint was about this size.
Yeah.
Because he'd be saying, I'm just nipping out for a pint with Billy. He'd come back later like this, So his wife thought a pint was, like 3 gallons or something.
Yeah. I can relate to that.
Yeah. Um, Again, why someone would lie about being drunk or how much they drank, I mean, that's entirely up to them. There could be any number of things going on, but if they're just going to keep on denying it, it's still just handling your reality. You do not necessarily need another person to validate what you already know to be true.
Right. Well, how would you set a boundary with that, or how would you set consequences with that, with something like that?
Hmm, you really put me on the spot.
I am. Some of these,
Again, it depends. It depends on the person. I
yeah.
remember, if this is of any help to you, I remember my dad telling me that when he was young and he was still living at home before he was married, and he used to take my mum out to dances and things. He'd get a wee drink and stuff like that, and then he'd walk her home. And then he had to run like hell to get home himself, because if he wasn't in by 10:30, his dad locked the door.
Mm. Hmm.
So, I'm not advocating we lock the door so people can't get in, but that's one way, I guess.
Yeah, yeah.
That's,
I mean, and yeah, no, I am putting you on the spot. It's just, some of these things are things that that are coming to mind as we're having this conversation, and situations I've been in, and so it's just like,
if the drink is a problem, if someone is coming in all the time, they're coming in the early hours of the morning. I mean, if they come home once in a while because they're out with their friends, you can't begrudge someone a good night out. But if the drink was a problem, maybe then it is something that needs to be addressed. It's something that needs to be looked at.
oh
Because
yeah, I mean, definitely,
I would think
especially
it's not that healthy, apart from
it's
any.
not healthy, and it's also getting behind the wheel with that.
Oh, well, that's getting into the realms of law and order now as well. You're not
Yeah,
just
and
be.
so there's definitely got to be that's definitely got to be addressed, but it's like, how do you address that without going to the nuclear option, I guess, because it's kind of just like, that's just a hard no.
Yeah.
um
Well, you know, maybe it sounds like I'm backtracking on what I said earlier, but sometimes maybe it has to be the nuclear option.
yeah, yeah, sometimes it does. I think that's a very good point, because certain things, especially with you, when you're in touch with what's okay and what's not okay,
Mm,
for you and the people that you have around in your life, then it should be a nuclear option at that point. If somebody's, especially if it's a more than one time thing,
mm,
you might want to, obviously, all of us, we want to give people the benefit of the doubt, but when people show us who they are multiple times, they're unwilling. It's clear that they're unwilling to change, and so we have to put ourselves first. We have to put our values first. Stand up for our principles. And as people that are, we want to be loyal to people, but when they are betraying the promises that they've made to us, betraying us, um, it's not something that can be overlooked. Um, we have just a couple more minutes here, but really quickly, tell me about the rewriting of history. Why do they do this?
Well, um, rewriting of history, giving another version of what happened. Um, Remember the false sense of self,
Yeah,
and it's very, very fragile. What they might be doing in the here and now might go against something they promised or something they did. It might be showing other people who they really are, what they really are. So again, it's like it never happened. And I suppose the example that comes to mind would be, you're familiar with the story 1984, the George Orwell book,
yeah, yeah. I
right?
read that when I was in middle school. I heard that they banned it now. They're not having it in schools, at least in this country, in the U.S. I don't know why.
Oh,
They're getting rid of so many good books, it seems like. But
I didn't
it's
know that.
probably because, we touched on this before we turned the camera on, but it seems to me that in our current culture, everyone wants to. I feel as if the infantilization maybe of adults is like a
Mm,
trend. This living
mm,
in victimhood, this living in, and I think that people are so easily offended by things,
mm,
that things that were commonplace before, things that were stimulating thought, like the book 1984, or even something, there's many books actually that it seems were part of the curriculum when I was growing up, that now they won't, that aren't part of the curriculum, or are in fact banned in the schools.
Yeah.
But it seems to be this trend in this victim type of encouraging on a cultural level to identify with this group or identify with this group,
Mm.
and therefore we've been oppressed or we've been done wrong by, and as somebody that's part of this group, now we are victims towards whatever it might be, the government or this other group of people or whatever. Is very interesting that it seems that these traits and narcissism seems to be more and more prevalent.
Bit of a correlation. Mm.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, yeah, it's the thing about the 1984. Well, first of all, I can't remember the author, but there is an author who I read a quote recently, and he said that yes, books are dangerous. They're supposed to be dangerous because they contain ideas.
Exactly.
So, but the example of the 1984, there's a bit in the book where the party, whoever it is that's in charge, I think it's just called the party. It's been
Yeah.
years from I've read it. Um,
Big Brother, the party, whatever.
yeah, yeah. They have said that on this date, something like a month from now, this date, they're going to be reducing the chocolate ration down to 20 grams.
Hmm.
On the day of the changeover, the headline reads, "The party have increased the chocolate ration to 20 grams." Now,
Wow.
everybody knows this is nonsense. Everybody knows this because until last week they got 30 grams.
Hmm.
But what the party does is they don't just put out a false headline, they go back to that article from a month earlier. That's scrapped and it's rewritten that it would be increased to 20. And that's now in the historical records.
That
Okay.
they changed. It's been increased to 20.
Yeah, yeah. So it's like it's not just that they've lied to everybody, but they've also went back and they've changed the past as well. So there's now no record of it. Okay. Now I use that as an example of that's not just rewriting the narrative. That's rewriting everything. That's rewriting the whole thing. And what you get with narcissistic people, again, remember that fragile sense of self. It's very, very fragile, can shatter very, very easily. So what you see is a rejection of anything that challenges that. So even the past, something that a conversation you had yesterday, last week, a year ago, it either didn't happen or it didn't happen the way you remember it.
Yeah.
Or what I really meant was, or I think you'll find that, or you fail to mention, all of this kind of stuff. And what that's doing is that showing what's going on in here and now is the reality. Just
Yeah.
just just like, just like the article in the paper, it's now being increased to 20 grams. And again, that is crazy making. And
Yeah. And
and if
it's
someone has been subjected to that for a long period of time, again, the little bits of doubt, that little piece at a time, um, they're finding it very hard and they're thinking back and they're trying to remember the conversation. And it doesn't help whenever they're saying, no, but at that time, if you remember this, and then they're told, yeah, but that's not what you said a week ago. That's not what you said yesterday. That's not what you said a minute ago. And the person's trying to remember what they said. They,
Yeah,
they,
it's
they,
weird because it seems like these people, they keep like a mental tally of any time that you've ever even said anything that was remotely um offense, that they took offense to or anything.
mm-hmm.
Whereas I don't keep a mental note of all that stuff. I know that these people have said stuff like that to me, but I'm not here. I don't have a laundry list of it written up
Mm.
in a notepad like maybe they do, or maybe they do mentally somehow. I don't know how they're able to
Well,
remember those things,
sometimes,
but
sometimes they might well do. Yeah, yeah. But
yeah,
remember, what you said, even if it was a week ago, they might have laughed. They thought it was funny.
yeah.
Or
No,
they might have
actually,
even agreed with you. But in this situation, it now becomes hurtful or
yeah.
offensive.
Well,
Or
that's
in,
what's so crazy about it, is that they've taken things that are actually positive things, positive memories that the two of you may have shared together, and turned them into you being the bad guy somehow even maybe you complimenting them in a certain way. Now they're saying, oh, well, you're using me because of this thing that you complimented me for, rather than the initial thing, which was appreciating the compliment, or like any normal person would do. They twist it on its head, because this is another thing that I've heard somebody else talk about, is that you were painted white at one time and now you're painted black. So anything that you've ever done is
You were
looked
the
at this
good guy.
lens
You were
of you
idealized.
being a bad
You
guy,
were perfect.
because of this
You were
black and white
fantastic.
thinking. There's no shades of gray.
And
Either go ahead.
sorry, I thought it was you there. I was going to say,
Oh
yeah.
yeah.
At one time, you were idealized. In other words, you were perfect. You were wonderful. You were the most amazing thing. They loved what they saw reflected in your eyes.
Yeah. Which is themselves.
Yeah, yeah,
Or
and
their false self.
yeah, they love that worship. They love that admiration. They love the fact that others are going to sacrifice for them, and others think they're wonderful, and that's what they love. But as time goes on, they realize human beings are flawed. Other human beings have needs. Other human beings only have so much capacity. They only have so much patience. And that's when, if you will, the devaluation starts to kick in, because you do get things wrong. There are times when you are too tired to pay me any attention. You're absolutely exhausted. Maybe you've just come off a 12-hour shift or something. You know, you do have other things and other people in your life. You have family, you have friends, you know, you might even have a pet or something. They're not the center of your universe. And
Yeah.
they start to devalue. And again, that's when, if you will, that's when a lot of the disrespect, boundary crossing, things like that start to happen. It started to treat worse and worse and worse. And the more we try to do to claw that back, as I said earlier, sometimes you see that behavior becoming more and more entrenched, because the more I behave like this, the harder they're going to try.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very, very strange, especially when you come from a point of view of somebody who is, like I said, trying to find common ground, trying to find a resolution, and trying to take an approach where, like, the more that you try to find that common ground where there's firm footing for both of you to agree on anything, they might, they dig even harder, and they take that almost as like weakness that you're trying to find in a really weird way.
And it's interesting you say that. They see it as a weakness, yeah, because again, with narcissism, things like flaws, humility, things like making error, they're considered to be weakness. They don't like weakness. They don't like it in themselves. They don't like it in their perfect partners. They don't like it in their perfect children. They don't like it in their perfect friends. So whenever someone does start to display just normal humanity, they're now bad, if you know what I mean. They're now
Yeah,
weak.
sorry. The video cut out for a second, but I think I got what you meant. It's ironic because, to me, I view that as strength. The willingness to try to see somebody else's point of view, the willingness to try to, and to me, they are the weak ones. The type of person that's going to stab you in the back, betray you, devalue you, disrespect you after it could be years of friendship or a relationship with them, over you not putting them at the center as the center of attention. I mean, that's pathetic to me. But yeah, so well, I would argue it's worse than being childlike. It's almost going into that sadism that you're talking about in the dark tetrad, and it's taking pleasure at other people's misery. And like you said, like if you determine that somebody else wanting to put positivity towards you and try to heal you or try to put their best foot forward is weakness, like, I think that's just absolutely pathetic. Like, but anyways, the last kind of point that I wanted to touch on here was, well, we kind of went over like the false apologies and it just apologizing, but then they never do anything to change the behavior or work on it. But this excessive need for validation, collusion, and triangulation, could we?
Sure. Yeah. Again, common characteristic associated more with narcissism is a constant need for validation and admiration.
Mm-hmm.
Remember, they're unique, they're special, they're drop dead gorgeous, they're the smartest person in the room, they're incredibly brave, they're affluent, intelligent, all of these kinds of things. And the validation is, everybody pretty much agreeing with them.
Mm-hmm.
I don't I'm not sure validation is the right word. It's the word you used a moment ago. It's collusion. I think they want people to collude with that version of them. They want to collude with their reality. Now,
Yeah.
what they
Their
do,
narrative, their rewritten version of events, their
absolutely,
magical
yeah.
version.
It's like again. Let's go back to the idea of the chocolate. It's about like they eat the chocolate and you're not happy about it because it was your chocolate. So what they do is they go to someone else and they say, "He ate my chocolate. That was my favorite chocolate. I had it sitting there. He ate it. Um, and then they might go to someone else and they say, "I'll tell you about him eating my chocolate." And they go, "What? Yeah, ask him over there. He knows because he did. He ate my chocolate." And then they come back to you and they go, "It wasn't me that ate the chocolate. Yeah, I didn't eat your chocolate. You ate mine." And you
Mm-hmm.
go, "What are you talking about?" And they say, "Yeah, everybody knows you ate my chocolate." No, everybody doesn't know. It's just you've been telling people.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But that has their person, their target, that has them feel as if they're being outnumbered, they're disbelieved. So they're feeling invalidated, if you know what I
Yeah.
mean. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes what they might do is they bring another person into the relationship. You talked about the triangulation again, another aspect of that. They bring somebody in and they either communicate through them. Now, you could be sitting there and they say, tell him I'm going out later. I'm sitting here, you could tell me yourself. So they're communicating through someone. It's a very manipulative kind of communication. It's very devaluing as well. Or they bring someone else into the relationship to induce jealousy.
Mm-hmm.
Not just jealousy. They're bringing someone in. Maybe it's the opposite sex, and they're trying to make someone feel insecure in the relationship. But even just bring someone in and spend far more time with them, pay them much more attention, and talk about how wonderful they are and all the great things they do. And the partner's sitting there going, I've just moved the house slightly to the left for you, and you're still moaning this is not good enough.
Yeah.
So um, the triangulation, it's such a multi-layered thing. They bring people in as well to, as we mentioned a moment ago, to collude with their version of things,
Mm-hmm.
to collude with their reality. Because again, as you talk about things like, they talk about their flying monkeys, their agents, their enablers, and things like that. And their target, their partner, whoever it happens to be, I just use the word target. Their target feels as if they're outnumbered. It feels as if they're being hit from all sides.
Yeah.
Everybody is believing them. So again,
Yeah.
they're feeling invalidated and all that sort of thing. But it's like I said earlier on, it can be painful, but you can validate yourself. You know what your sense of reality is.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And having that sense, I think it can be helpful too to like write things down actually as they occurred, or to have other people that are around you. I mean, again, it comes back to have that support system, because if you have other people that are around you that know the both of you,
Hmm.
um, they've seen things, and they know that you know this version that they're spinning of events is just not the truth, especially if they've had encounters with the two of you before.
Yeah.
Things are good, things are positive, and then all of a sudden this devaluations and all this stuff happens out of nowhere.
Hmm.
Your friends and family are going to be like, this person's delusional.
Yeah.
um, they should be, if you have a good, healthy supportive friends and family. But again, that's dangerous, because in many circumstances people have probably been isolated from
Yeah. Yeah.
their.
And if that's the case, I mean, what I would say to people is if you cannot, first of all, maybe try to reconnect with old friends you haven't seen in a while, family members. And we can feel a bit embarrassed. We can feel a bit, what if they start asking me questions? Well, you know what? Chances are they will. That's perfectly all right. They're going to ask, where
Mhm.
the hell have you been? We haven't seen you. How are you getting on?
Yeah.
Um, but generally, what you'll find is they're glad to see you. They're glad to
Hmm.
hear from you. And you don't have to tell your story straight away, and you don't have to pour it all. You don't have to tell them anything at all. It's up to you. You can tell your therapist, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Either that, if you can't do that, then what you do is you try to find a new network of friends.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't have to be anything massive. It doesn't have to be, you don't all have to be, you know, going off on adventures together, whatever. It could just be talking to people in the coffee shop.
Yeah.
It could be talking to people in the workplace.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if the guys in work are planning something at the weekend, you know, ask if you could go along. It
Yeah.
doesn't have to be anything massive. Just little, small, tiny things.
Yeah.
You just start to create your own support network.
Yeah, absolutely. And that can be, you know, so massive for people now, especially it seems like we become more disconnected from people than ever, especially after 2020.
Yeah.
But I think that having in-person, you know, interactions with people and having those friends around you is, and that's tough too, because you might end up running into some more narcissists.
Well, you might.
But you might not, though. You
Yeah,
might find.
but this is the thing I was going to say. I mean, we might run into more narcissists. Remember, we're talking about a spectrum.
Hmm.
Sometimes we're just going to meet someone who is just self-absorbed.
Hmm.
That's it. And when,
Yeah.
there's maybe no harm in them. They don't get what's going on with you because what's going on with them is much more important.
Yeah.
In case you can, you know, give them lip service, whatever, but you don't have
But
to hang with them.
with those people, they're not going to go through these stages of
No,
devaluation and disrespect and all, and
not necessarily.
gaslighting and
No, no.
I mean every single manipulation tactic that's in the book. It seems
If
like these people have gone through a handbook on manipulation tactics. Honestly,
Well, this is it. I mean, it's a curious thing is, you know, the belief in being unique and special and all the rest of us. Like I said earlier, they are, but no more than the rest of us.
yeah,
Um, but if they were as truly unique and special as they think they are, why are there so many articles, books, YouTube videos that can outline pretty much everything they're doing?
right. And once you become aware of it, it actually becomes extremely predictable.
Yeah,
The types of behavior, the type of things that they're going to do.
you know what's coming next. Yeah.
Yeah. So, well, Darren, thank you so much. This has been an enlightening conversation. This, you know, your understanding of all these different things is clearly you have a deep level of understanding of all of these types of things that occur when dealing with people on this spectrum. As you mentioned, it's a spectrum. Some people may just be self-absorbed. There's
Mhm.
other traits. You mentioned histrionic. All of these things, those are all part of a cluster B
Mhm.
personality. Yeah. And it could be, like you said, they could be disorders, or I think some of these people, their decisions. I heard somebody make that distinction that it's not necessarily a disorder, it's a decision. If they're doing this
Yeah.
knowingly,
Yeah.
then yeah. So,
That's why I
you
said
know,
earlier, if it works for them,
if it works for them,
that's
yeah.
fine.
But it's important for all of us to be aware of this. I think it's very important. Nowadays, you see that this is. It seems like a lot of people are dealing with people like this. It could be that this has been going on. I mean, I'm sure obviously human nature doesn't change all that much over the course of time, and I know that this isn't anything new, but it
Mm.
seems that more and more people are dealing with people like this, and at least are becoming more aware of it. And
Yeah.
so, having the tools to identify this, the tools to deal with it, is extremely, extremely important. And being able to believe somebody when they show you who you are, you can have the best
Mm.
intentions. You can see people as being see them as being as lovely as you can, but once they've shown you that they're not living
It's
up to,
it was a facade.
it
Yeah.
was a facade. Yeah. And so you have to believe them when that happens. And so I really appreciate the work that you do and making people more aware of these things and giving people the tools to deal with it. So thank you very much. I'm going to leave for everybody watching this Darren's information below so you guys can check out his channel and all of his links. And with that being said, much love as always. Hit this video with a like, drop us a comment down below to let us know your thoughts on this. And if you resonate with these points, if you have been dealing with this type of thing in your life as well, we'd be curious to hear your experiences down below. And with that being said, much love as always. Hit me with a subscribe. I will see you guys in the next video.
Thanks for having